Okay, now in this part of the practical, that is your practical number 1, this is cloud practical number 1, this is my part C. So what happened in this part? We already done with the connection establishment with the server. So in this case, right, server is on port number 8888. Client sends the request for connection establishment using this port. Server accept the request and the connection is done between these two machines. Now after the successful connection establishment, it is time to start the communication between the client and server. So now to start with the communication, the first part, right, will start from the client. Client accepts the input from the user and send that request or a input to the server. So in the communication phase, the first role will start from the client. Client will start the communication phase. It will send the request to the server. Server accepts the request and server will check the request sent by the client. Only this part will be covered in the part C. In this, we will send a request to the server. Client will send the request to the server. Server accepts the request and check it. Server will check the request sent by the client to the server. So let us start with this part. So this is a connection establishment code, right? We have a server file and client. This is TCP server connection establishment code, and this is your TCP connection establishment code for the client. So now the communication phase will start from the client. Client uses a class called as BuffredeReader. Right? The BuffredeReader is a class that reads the text from the character input stream. That means it is a class which is responsible to take the input from the user. So now we will create an object of the BuffredeReader BR equals to new BuffredeReader, then new. This is the syntax. We have to remember this. Input stream reader. Within bracket we will write system dot input. So whatever the input is entered by the user, right, it is first converted into input stream reader, and input stream reader, right, gives the input to the BuffredeReader. That means this is a syntax. We can say that it is a syntax to create a BuffredeReader object. With the help of this object, right, we will take an input. So now I am taking an input sout, that is the system.out.println. I am taking enter the string. This is my simple string. I am just taking a string from the user. Now we will store this string in the variable str using br.readLine. So do remember, this is a code to take the input from the user. Whenever we want to take the input from the user, right, we just declare the BuffredeReader object. We just print the message. Whatever the input is entered by the user, we will give the suggestion, enter the text, enter the string, enter your name, and whatever the input is entered by the user, we will store that input in the variable. So this is the code to take the input. Now we will send this input to the server. This is my input. This input is sent to the server. So to send the request to the server, we use a class PrintWriter. PrintWriter is a class which is used to send the data from one machine to another machine. Whenever the client wants to send request to the server, it uses a PrintWriter. When server wants to send the response to the client, again the server will use the PrintWriter class. Now I am creating an object of the PrintWriter, that is my PW equals to new PrintWriter within bracket new output stream writer. This is not an input, this is your output, output stream. So whatever the request is sent by the client to the server, is on socket. That means client sends the request on socket s dot get output stream. So now this is a syntax to create a PrintWriter object. So in this case, the main difference we have to remember this is s dot get. Here we are taking the input from the system. That means we are not taking the input from the socket. System means console. Whatever the input entered by the user on console, वो read होगा and it is stored in the str. But in this case, we are sending the output, output stream writer to the server. That means server is bind with the client using a socket. Therefore, we are using a socket s object dot get output stream, and now we will send pw dot println and the variable str and pw dot flush. So this is a code, to send the data from one machine to another machine. I am not saying client to server or server to client. Whenever one machine wants to send the data to the another machine using a TCP protocol, so PrintWriter class is used, println, this is your str, and flush. Flush will send the data and empty the buffer. Buffer gets empty after execution of pw.flush line. So now the data is sent to the server. Right now we are on client. Client takes the input from the user and sends the data to the server. Now server will receive this input. Again I am telling, do remember students, server will receive this input from the socket, not from the system. So go to the server now. Whenever we want to receive something, the class is fixed, that is your BuffredeReader class. Here we use a BuffredeReader class again, new BuffredeReader, new input stream reader, but this time the input that we read is not from the system, this is from the socket, because client ने जो request send किया है, it is on socket. Therefore we read the input stream from the socket. S. So, client sends the request, output on socket, server will read the request from the socket. This is your socket. So now again we will store this request req is equal to br.readline. But this time this readline method will read the data or read the request from the socket, not from the system, and we will check the request sent by the client. So this is my request from client plus the request is in RE. Now we will execute this part of the code. We will check the client, the request sent by the client is accepted by the server and it is printed on server machine. So we will start the execution from the server. Why? Because server first start its code, then client will send the request. Right click, execute, run file. As we can see here, it is showing the waiting for the client. Now go to the client, right click, execute, connection is done. On both the sides just check, see, connection is done. Now it it is asking the input. So now I am sending a input Shahid and enter. So this request is sent to the server. Just check on server, right? Request from the client. So in this way, right, we will complete it with the part C of the practical number 1. I hope you understood.